He limped into the station at sunrise, soaked and trembling, a child's bloody scarf hanging from his mouth. No one knew yet that the quiet golden retriever had just cracked open a case more monstrous than anyone dared imagine. The glass doors of the Willow Creek Police Department slid open with a soft hiss just after sunrise. Most of the town was still quiet, the streets wet from a night of rain. Inside the station, the hum of vending machines and the clatter of keyboards filled the space as officers shuffled through morning reports. No one noticed the dog at first, not until he reached the middle of the lobby and let out a low, broken whine. Officer Riley looked up from her desk, startled. A golden retriever stood there, soaked to the bone, his fur matted with mud and streaks of something darker. He was limping, one back leg barely touching the ground. His chest heaved with every breath, and he held something in his mouth. It was a scarf, bright pink once, now torn and smeared with blood. The room went still. Chairs scraped back. Coffee cups were set down. Riley stood, slowly, her eyes locked on the dog's face. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just stared at her with eyes too tired for his young face. She took one step forward, hands low and open. "Hey there, buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Where'd you get that?" The dog took one shaky step closer, then gently dropped the scarf at her feet. Blood soaked into the floor tile. Riley reached for it, but the dog growled, low and deep. Not a threat, but a warning. Don't touch it. Not yet. Not without listening. Other officers stepped in, murmuring confusion. A dispatcher called someone from the back. The dog didn't look at any of them. His eyes stayed on Riley, still trembling, still waiting. She crouched carefully, her knees cracking under her. "Is it yours?" she asked, though she knew it wasn't. The scarf was too small, too delicate. It belonged to a child. The dog whimpered, a pitiful, soft sound that tightened her chest. Someone reached for the scarf. The dog snarled, baring his teeth, his legs wobbling under him. Riley lifted a hand to stop them. "He's not done," she said quietly. "Let him show us." As if he understood, the dog turned, limped to the door, and paused. He looked back at her. Not just at her, but through her. Then he barked once, weak but urgent, and stepped outside. The doors hissed closed behind him. For a moment, no one moved. Then Riley snatched her jacket and keys. "I'm following him," she said. "Someone grab a radio and keep the line open. I need backup on standby." "You're chasing a stray?" one officer asked. "No," Riley said, already heading for the door. "I'm following a witness." Outside, the morning mist curled along the ground like smoke. The golden retriever had already reached the sidewalk, his paws leaving faint smears of red on the concrete. He looked back once more to be sure she was coming. And then he started walking. Not aimlessly, not lost, but with purpose. The golden retriever moved slowly but with purpose, his limp worse now, his body trembling with every step. Officer Riley followed behind in her patrol car, crawling at a walking pace, headlights cutting through the fog that still hung over the woods like a heavy blanket. She kept the window down, the radio turned low, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. The dog didn't stop. He led them through quiet back roads, past old fences, forgotten mailboxes, and rusting signs pointing toward trailheads no one used anymore. Other units had joined in, one marked car behind hers, and another SUV just ahead, but no one dared drive too close. The dog had a rhythm, a strange urgency, as if he was barely holding on but knew the way by heart. After almost 2 miles, the road narrowed and disappeared into a dirt path. Riley stopped the car and stepped out. The air smelled like pine and damp soil, and every sound was sharper now, twigs cracking, birds flapping, wind moving through trees like whispers. The dog had veered off the road and was now slipping between tall grass and thick underbrush, heading straight into the forest. Riley and 2 other officers followed on foot, boots crunching over dead leaves. "You're sure about this?" one asked. She didn't answer. She couldn't. She just kept going. The dog pushed forward, through brambles and fallen logs, never hesitating. His fur snagged on branches, but he didn't flinch. His breaths came rough and shallow now, every few steps followed by a pause, a moment to gather strength. Then he moved again. 10 minutes into the trees, the forest opened up slightly, and there it was, an old hunting cabin, nearly swallowed by vines and rot. The roof sagged, the windows were boarded, and the porch steps had collapsed long ago. The dog limped to the far side of the cabin, sniffed the ground, then started pawing at a thick pile of leaves near a rotted stump. Riley stepped closer, heart thudding. The dog growled low, not at her, but at the ground, like he was daring it to hide something from him. She knelt and brushed aside the leaves. Beneath them was a slab of wood, warped and weathered, a trapdoor. Her stomach turned. 2 officers helped lift it. The hinges screamed. A cold draft rose from the hole, thick with the smell of mildew and something worse. Riley clicked on her flashlight and looked down. A small figure sat hunched in the far corner, arms wrapped around her knees, head resting on a dirty teddy bear. Her hair was matted, her clothes torn, and her ankles bound with duct tape. "Lily," Riley breathed. "It's her. It's Lily Matthews." She was barely alive, her face pale, eyes red and swollen. But when she saw the flashlight, she blinked slowly and raised her head. Riley dropped into the pit without waiting. "It's okay," she whispered, carefully peeling the tape from the girl's wrists. "You're safe now." The girl clutched her teddy bear tighter and whispered one word, barely more than a breath. "Finn!" Riley looked back up. The dog stood at the edge of the trapdoor, blood dripping from his leg, tongue hanging from exhaustion, but his eyes stayed on the girl, still watching, still guarding. "Still, Finn." The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines and the slow, steady rise and fall of Lily's chest. She was resting now, her hand still clinging to the battered teddy bear, as if letting go would pull her back into the dark. Her wrists were wrapped in gauze, her face marked with small bruises and cuts, but she was alive. And beside her bed, curled up on a blanket with an IV taped to his paw, lay Finn. His breathing was shallow, his fur still stained, but his eyes never left her. Outside the room, Officer Riley stood beside a man who hadn't spoken since she let him through the doors. Joel Matthews looked like he'd been carved from grief. His flannel shirt was soaked from rain, his jeans stained with dirt and engine oil. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were sunken and wild, like he hadn't truly slept since Lily disappeared. "That's my dog," he whispered, staring through the glass at Finn. "That's Finn." Riley nodded. "And that's your daughter." Joel didn't move, just pressed his hand against the glass. His fingers trembled. "She told us his name," Riley said softly. "First thing she said. Not mine. Not another officer's. His." Joel swallowed hard and finally looked at her. "I told you," he said. "I told everyone. That dog was trying to find her. He knew. He never stopped knowing." She remembered the reports now, the calls Joel had made, the times he showed up at the station, frantic, begging them to track Finn. He'd said the dog had gone off into the woods, always in the same direction, barking and whining like he was onto something. But no one took him seriously. Not after his past came up. The DUI from 3 years ago, the bar fight that landed him a broken nose and a court date, the custody hearing with Lily's aunt after his wife passed. People whispered he wasn't stable, that he couldn't handle being a single father, that maybe he had something to do with Lily's disappearance. Joel had seen it in their eyes, that doubt, that quiet judgment. Even Riley had wondered. But now here they were, Lily safe, Finn bloodied but alive, and Joel standing there like he didn't know whether to collapse or scream. "I'm sorry," Riley said finally. "We should have listened." Joel shook his head slowly. "It's not about me. It's about her. About him." He stepped into the room, carefully, slowly, like he was afraid she'd vanish if he moved too fast. "Hey, baby," he whispered, kneeling beside her. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him, Her face crumpled and she reached for him. He held her close, careful of her injuries, whispering into her hair, "I'm here. I've got you. You're safe now." Finn thumped his tail once against the floor. Joel reached out and placed a hand on the dog's head. "You did it, boy," he said, voice cracking. "You found her. You brought her back." And for the first time since it all began, Joel Matthews let himself cry. Rain started falling just after the sun broke through the clouds, as if the sky couldn't decide between hope and sorrow. While Lily was being wheeled into the emergency wing, and Joel sat beside her with one hand on Finn's back, another scene unfolded deep in the woods, where it had all begun. The old hunting cabin, forgotten and rotting, was now alive with flashing lights and the low voices of officers and investigators picking their way through the ruins. Crime scene tape flapped in the wind. The door to the trapdoor had been left open, the earth beneath damp and cold. Officer Riley stood just outside it, arms crossed, her face pale. She had seen many things in her years on the force, but this felt different. It felt wrong. The forensic team moved with quiet urgency. Cameras clicked, evidence bags crinkled. A technician called out for a UV light, and someone else dragged in a portable heater to dry out the muddy floor. Inside the cabin, beneath the warped wood and piles of leaves, was more than just the spot where Lily had been held. There were others. Rope fibers were tucked into the seams of the walls, broken bits of zip ties stuffed behind a cabinet, fingerprints that didn't belong to anyone local. Blood smears, long dried and nearly invisible, now glowing faintly under special lights. And then there were the bones. They were small, fragile. One set found in a crawl space behind a stack of broken chairs, another near the chimney, hidden beneath a layer of soot and ash. A third, buried shallow beneath the porch, unearthed when one officer tripped and his boots sank into loose soil. The remains told a silent story, one no one wanted to hear. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the second. Some of the bones were fresh, months old at most. Others, older, years. One forensics expert looked up from the dirt and whispered, "We've got at least 4, maybe 5, children." The wind picked up again and carried the smell of moss and old metal. Then came the clue no one expected. It was found under a floorboard near the back of the cabin, where the wall had started to give. One of the officers had stepped too hard, and the board snapped in two. Beneath it, buried in a patch of soft earth, was something round and flat. A badge. Sheriff's issue, silver, tarnished and bent at one corner like it had been stomped or thrown, the emblem still clear enough to read, Willow Creek County. Riley took it with gloved hands, staring at it like it might burn her. "Who did this cabin used to belong to?" someone asked. No one answered at first. Then an older deputy stepped forward, rubbing his chin. "Used to be part of an old hunting club," he said. "Shut down years ago. Shared by a few locals, mostly law enforcement." Riley didn't move. She kept her eyes on the badge. And, in her mind, something started to shift. The monster who hurt Lily wasn't a stranger. He was someone they knew. The sky was already dark by the time Officer Riley returned to the station, her boots still muddy from the cabin site, her mind heavy with everything she had seen. She sat in the evidence room, flipping through files that should have been reviewed long ago. The old complaints Joel Matthews had filed were still there, buried in a stack of reports that had all been marked the same way: closed, no further action, resolved. But they weren't resolved. Not even close. There were more than a dozen entries. Joel had come in multiple times over the past year. He'd reported a van parked across from his house late at night, men smoking near the fence line, watching the backyard. He'd written a letter about a neighbor who had tried to talk to Lily through the fence, offering her candy. He'd even brought Lily in after she came home with a bruise on her arm and said she'd fallen at school. Though Joel didn't believe her, he begged someone to investigate. But the reports were thin, vague. Some didn't even have full officer names signed off, and the same name kept showing up on the cleared lines: Detective Mason Hale. He had been the lead on Lily's case when she first went missing. He'd given the press briefings, held Joel back when he tried to cross the police line, and shook his head solemnly at the town hall meetings. Hale had been a cop for 30 years before retiring just last fall, with medals and plaques and a special chair reserved at every community event. Riley stared at his name, feeling something she didn't want to feel: doubt. She dug into the digital logs next, pulling up the body cam footage from the day Joel had reported Lily missing. It was supposed to be standard protocol: catalog, label, archive, but the entry was missing. She checked again. Nothing. Then she did something she wasn't sure she was allowed to do. She accessed the internal backup drive. Tucked inside a mislabeled folder was a video file. Grainy. Unnamed. She clicked it. The footage began with Hale's boots crunching on the gravel outside Joel's home. Joel was pacing in the yard, his hands shaking, his voice breaking. The dog, Finn, was barking non-stop, pawing at the fence like he wanted to leap into the trees behind the house. "She's not the type to run off," Joel said. "She never goes anywhere without Finn." "Dogs follow scent," Hale replied. "Maybe she chased something." Joel spun around. "He's not chasing. He's tracking. He's been pulling me toward the woods for 2 days now. Something's wrong." Hale's voice lowered. "You have a record, Joel. If there's something you're not telling me." Joel stepped back, furious. "You think I'd hurt my own daughter?" The clip ended there. Riley sat back, her stomach twisting. That footage had never been logged, never reviewed, never seen. She downloaded it and drove across town to the quiet neighborhood where Mason Hale now lived. A tidy house with a green lawn and a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. He answered the door in a robe, holding a cup of tea. His silver hair was combed, his badge from retirement still hanging in a frame behind him. Riley didn't smile. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice steady, "about Lily Matthews, and why you buried the truth." The house still smelled like antiseptic and hospital bandages. Joel sat on the edge of Lily's bed, watching her sleep. Her teddy bear was tucked under one arm, and Finn lay curled up beside her, his body pressed close like he could shield her from the world if anything came near again. The stitches on his leg were fresh, and the vet had warned he needed rest. But every few hours, his ears would twitch and his eyes would open, scanning the shadows like he was waiting for something. Joel rubbed his hands together, eyes heavy, voice low. "You know," he said to Officer Riley, who stood quietly by the door, "that dog used to walk her to school every morning, wouldn't let her out of his sight. If she forgot her lunch, he'd bark until I brought it. If a stranger so much as looked her way, he'd step between them." Riley nodded. She'd seen the bond. Finn hadn't moved from Lily's side since the hospital, hadn't eaten unless she was awake, hadn't slept until she did. "There was a winter," Joel went on, "maybe 2 years ago. She was playing on the creek behind the house. Ice gave out. She went under." His voice caught. Finn dove in without even thinking, dragged her out, got frostbite on his paws. Vet said he could have died. Riley looked at the dog, now twitching gently in sleep. "He's more than a pet." Joel smiled faintly. "He's her shadow, her shield. If he came back to the station that morning with her scarf," he swallowed hard, "it's because he found something no one else wanted to see." That night, the wind came back, cold and sharp. Rain tapped against the windows, and the trees outside creaked like old bones. Joel sat at the kitchen table, staring at a worn photo of Sarah, Lily's mom, holding baby Lily with Finn curled at her feet. His hand hovered over the table, tapping without rhythm. He almost didn't hear the soft click of the back door. When he turned, Finn was already slipping outside, limping slightly but moving fast. Joel didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat, strapped a body cam to his chest, one Riley had left him, just in case, and followed. Out past the porch, down the muddy path, through the backyard and into the trees. Finn moved like a dog with a mission, head low, tail stiff, nose brushing the earth as he cut through the brush like he'd walked this trail 100 times. Joel struggled to keep up. Branches slapped against his coat, mud soaked his boots. The cold bit at his fingers. "Finn," he called once. The dog didn't stop. They went deeper into the woods, past where Lily had been found, beyond the cabin, into a part of the forest Joel had never stepped foot in. The wind howled above them. Then, suddenly, Finn stopped. He turned his head and looked back, eyes bright, breath puffing in the dark. Then he moved again. Joel knew, without a doubt, they were heading somewhere no one else had dared to look. And Finn wasn't done. Not yet. The farmhouse stood like a forgotten memory at the edge of the woods, half swallowed by weeds and silence. The porch was caved in, the shutters crooked, and vines climbed the siding like they were trying to pull the house back into the earth. Joel had never seen the place before, but Finn walked straight to it, nose to the ground, steps sure and focused. His limp had gotten worse, and still he pressed on, tail stiff, ears alert. Officer Riley arrived 10 minutes after Joel called. She parked just off the road, eyes scanning the dark windows with suspicion. Her flashlight cut across the overgrown yard, catching Finn as he reached the steps and sat down, staring at the door like he was daring it to open. "This place," Riley said, stepping beside Joel, "used to belong to Ray Crowley. Deputy. Died in a crash 3 years ago. Real sudden." "Crowley," Joel repeated. "I remember the name. People said he drank. Lost control on a wet road. But some thought it didn't add up. No investigation ever opened." Joel looked at the house. "Finn brought us here. He must know something." They pushed through the sagging front door, the hinges groaning. Dust hung thick in the air, and the smell of mildew stung their noses. Furniture lay overturned. Photos on the wall had water damage and faces faded by time. It looked abandoned, forgotten, but the air felt wrong, too still, too cold, like something inside hadn't moved, but never left. Finn walked ahead, his nose pressed to the floorboards, following a scent no one else could sense. He led them through the kitchen, past a cracked refrigerator and broken chair, then stopped at a small door near the pantry. It led to the basement. The stairs creaked with every step. Joel gripped the railing tight, the beam from Riley's flashlight bouncing across the walls. The basement was cluttered. Old hunting gear, toolboxes, a rusted freezer with the cord cut. Finn paused, sniffed, then padded over to the far wall. He began to paw at a shelf. Joel helped move it. Dust flew up. Behind the shelf, part of the wall looked different. Newer wood, mismatched paint. Riley ran her hand along the edge, then stopped. Her fingers found a seam. A latch. She pressed it, and the panel popped open with a soft click. Behind it was a hidden room. It wasn't big, but it was full. The walls were covered in pinned newspaper clippings, each one about a missing child. Different towns, different years. Most barely noticed when they disappeared. Photos were taped beneath them. School portraits, faded snapshots, some with closed, scrawled in red across the bottom. A corkboard held maps with circles drawn in black ink. Each circle marked a place where a child had vanished. Willow Creek was one of them. So was Crowley's cabin. In the center of the room sat a metal table, and on it, a single black binder. Riley opened it. Inside were names, dozens of them. Children, their ages, last seen locations, even short notes. Runaway, no leads, mother unstable. Joel leaned over her shoulder. They dismissed every one of these cases. Riley flipped to the last page. One name was written in larger handwriting, darker, underlined twice. Mason Hale. Joel's blood ran cold. Crowley was keeping track, Riley said. Or someone was. Finn sat in the doorway, silent, eyes fixed on the binder. He had led them to the truth. And the truth was still alive. The room was silent, except for the rustle of pages, as Officer Riley flipped through the binder again, her eyes scanning each name with growing dread. Joel stood close, fists clenched, his breathing slow and uneven. The walls felt tighter now, the air colder. In the middle of a page near the back, under several names crossed out in red ink, was one written heavier than the rest. Mason Hale. No dates, no remarks. Just the name, bold and underlined, like it was meant to scream. Joel stared at it, his voice rough. Why would Crowley write that? Riley didn't answer right away. She kept reading. A map pinned nearby had small red thumbtacks along highways and back roads. One was near Lily's school. Another was only a mile from Joel's home. Back at the station, the binder was sealed into evidence. Riley made copies of everything. Photos of the room, the board, the maps. She took a deep breath and picked up her phone. I'm going to see him, she said. Now. Detective Mason Hale's house sat quiet on a well-kept street. The porch light was on, even though the sun had barely set. He answered the door, wearing the same calm expression he always had, the kind of practiced calm that made people trust him. He even smiled a little. Officer Riley, he said, stepping aside. Back again? She didn't smile. I have some questions. He nodded and motioned toward the living room. His medals and retirement gifts still lined the mantel. A framed photo of him shaking hands with the mayor sat beside a plaque for outstanding service. Riley didn't sit. I went to Crowley's old place, she said. Hale raised an eyebrow. That dump? We found a hidden room. Files. Names of children. Photos. A binder. She paused. Your name was in it. He didn't flinch. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Is there? She asked. Because I've looked at your case files. Dozens of missing kids. Dismissed. Closed with no follow-up. All connected by location. All kids who'd been flagged for family issues or lived near shelters. His smile faded. That's not proof. Riley reached into her coat and pulled out a phone. She hit play. The recording was soft, taken at the hospital. Lily's voice, weak but clear, filled the quiet room. He smelled like the man who used to talk to Daddy. Hale's jaw tightened. She said that after waking up, Riley added. She didn't know your name, but she remembered your cologne, the same one you're wearing right now. Silence. Riley stared at him. You were at Joel's house. You talked to him. You closed his complaints. You cleared yourself from the inside. Hale stood still, too still. Then his voice dropped, colder now. You think the word of a scared little girl is enough to bring down my life's work? Riley stepped closer. It's not just her word. It's the trail, the binder, the badge we found buried at the cabin. You're not in the clear anymore. For the first time, the mask cracked, just slightly. And Riley knew. He had been hiding in plain sight. But Finn had smelled the truth. And now, so did she. The road to Mason Hale's lake house twisted along the edge of Stillwater Lake, the trees crowding in on both sides. It was the kind of place no one stumbled onto by accident. Isolated, quiet, hidden behind tall gates and a long gravel drive. Riley parked her unmarked car just outside the range of the cameras she'd seen on her last visit. The air was heavy with fog, and the only sound was the gentle slap of water against the shore. She moved fast, dressed in black, her badge and weapon tucked beneath her jacket. The warrant wasn't signed yet, but she couldn't wait. Not after what she'd seen. Not after the look on Hale's face when Lily's words hit him like a crack in the ice. The back door was locked, but she'd watched Hale long enough to know he rarely used it. The sliding panel was old and warped. With a quick shove of her shoulder and a metal shim, the latch gave way. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and cleaning supplies. It was neat, too neat, as if it had been scrubbed clean not just of dirt but of truth. Riley didn't waste time upstairs. She moved straight to the basement door and slipped down the stairs. The temperature dropped with every step. The basement was finished, but the light switch didn't work. She pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and scanned the space. At first, it looked like storage, holiday boxes, fishing gear, old furniture stacked against the wall. But behind a curtain of hanging tarps, she found something different. Cabinets, locked filing drawers, shelves with plastic tubs. She popped the lid off the nearest one. Inside were folders, copies of reports she recognized, old cases, missing children, every file stamped closed. She pulled another tub closer. Toys, a hairbrush, a pair of small shoes. Each item labeled with a name and date. Riley's stomach turned. She opened a drawer at the far end of the room and found photos. Dozens of them. Some looked like surveillance stills, children on playgrounds, at grocery stores, walking home. Others were darker. Handwritten notes lined the edges. Names, times, behavior patterns. She flipped through them with a sick feeling growing in her chest. And then she saw it. Taped to the inside of the drawer was a photo. Ray Crowley, smiling, hand extended. Mason Hale stood across from him, shaking his hand. They were standing in front of a log cabin, paint chipped, windows boarded. The same cabin where Lily had been found. A banner above them read, "Private Fundraiser, Willow Creek County." It wasn't just Hale. This was organized. She dropped the photo into her bag and grabbed as many files as she could carry. Before leaving, she looked at the map pinned to the wall above the desk. Red dots marked dozens of locations across the state. And every child listed in the binder? They had all lived within 5 miles of one of those dots. This wasn't one man acting alone. This was something much worse. Something planned. Riley backed out of the basement, heart racing, hand on her gun. Every instinct screamed that she was now in the middle of something far bigger than she'd imagined. But she also knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stop. Because Finn had led them here for a reason. And Riley was finally listening. The sun had just dipped below the trees when Joel heard the crunch of tires on gravel. He looked up from the porch, where he'd been sitting with Finn asleep at his feet, and saw a car he didn't recognize. It pulled into the driveway slowly, deliberately, and parked just shy of the house. Joel's stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. He stood and took a step toward the door, reaching for his phone. Finn's ears twitched, then stood up. A low growl rumbled from his chest. The car door opened, and Mason Hale stepped out. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't wearing a badge. And he wasn't empty-handed. The silver of a handgun caught the last of the light. Joel froze. "You shouldn't be here." Hale walked forward, slow and steady. "I didn't come to talk." Finn stood now, in front of Joel, fur raised, teeth bared. "I know what you found," Hale said. "You, and that dog, and that girl. She's been saying things. You've stirred up a lot of dust, Joel." Joel's hand slipped into his back pocket, tapping a preset on his phone. No ringtone, just a silent call sent to Riley's number. Then he dropped the phone behind the chair like it had slipped by accident. "Whatever you think you're doing," Joel said, keeping his voice calm, "it's over. There are files, photos. You can't clean this up." Hale raised the gun. "I've done this longer than you've been a father. You think you're special? You're just another broken man who let the world move on without him." Finn barked, sharp and vicious. Joel didn't move. Then Hale took one step too close. Finn launched forward, teeth flashing, his body a blur of motion. Hale fired, the shot cracking through the air like lightning. Joel dropped to the ground, hands over his head. Finn collided with Hale's chest, knocking him back. The gun clattered across the porch. Blood sprayed against the railing. Joel scrambled forward, heart pounding. "Finn! Finn!" The dog lay on the boards, panting hard, one leg soaked in red, but his eyes were open. He was alive. Hale rolled over with a grunt, reaching for the gun. Then came the screech of tires. Doors flying open, shouts from every direction. Hands in the air. Riley's voice cut through the chaos. Officers flooded the yard, weapons drawn. Hale didn't resist. He lifted his hands, slow and smug, like it was a game. 2 agents slammed him to the ground, cuffed his wrists, and hauled him to his feet. "You were warned," Riley said, stepping close. "Now you're done." Joel didn't hear the rest. He was already beside Finn, pressing a towel to the wound, whispering over and over, "Stay with me, buddy. You did good. Just stay with me." Finn licked his hand once, then laid his head down, trusting Joel to carry the rest. And he would, because this time they were ready. And this time, the dog didn't fall alone. The evidence came in waves, box after box, folder after folder. Riley spent hours sorting through the files taken from Hale's lake house, her hands shaking more than she cared to admit. Every document seemed to unlock another horror, but the worst was yet to come. When the lab reports returned, the final pieces snapped into place like a lock clicking shut. DNA pulled from the basement storage tubs matched 5 missing children from surrounding counties. The hairbrushes, toothbrushes, and personal items stored in plastic bags weren't just trophies, they were records, traces of lives stolen and hidden. Some had been marked with notes in Hale's handwriting. Short phrases like compliant, transferred, and in one case, simply gone. Among the paperwork was a small leather journal tucked inside a locked drawer. The initials, RC, were burned into the cover. Ray Crowley's handwriting filled the pages, sloppy, rushed, often smudged, but clear enough. It was all there. The meetings, the exchanges, names of buyers hidden behind codes, descriptions of the children like they were property. Riley read through it with a lump in her throat. Crowley had written everything down, not out of guilt, but as a record, maybe even leverage. He'd gotten careless toward the end, talked too much, missed signals, and that's when Hale stepped in. The last journal entry read, "Mason says it's slipping. Told me to stay quiet. I think he means it." That was dated 3 days before Crowley's car went off a ravine and burst into flames. There were no skid marks on the road, no attempt to brake. Hale had claimed it was alcohol and rain. Now it was clear it had been something else entirely. Crowley hadn't just lost control, he'd been removed. Riley handed the journal over to the federal team. They didn't ask questions. They knew what this meant. This wasn't just about one girl or one town. This was part of something wider, something that had stretched across county lines, maybe even states, and at the center of it all stood a man they had once honored with awards and handshakes. Finn's part in the story nearly went overlooked, until Joel spoke up. He told them about the day 3 years ago, just after his wife's funeral, when Finn had collapsed in the backyard without warning. The vet had suspected poisoning but never found the source. The symptoms were there: vomiting, disorientation, loss of coordination, but Finn survived. Barely. At the time, Joel thought it was just another blow in a year already filled with loss. But now it made sense. Finn had been there the night Sarah Matthews died. Joel had blamed the dog in a drunken rage, thinking he'd failed to protect her. But maybe Finn had been targeted too. Maybe he had tried to stop what was happening, and paid the price for it. Riley sat beside Finn in the recovery room that night, her fingers stroking his ear. "You remembered," she whispered. "You knew, all this time." He blinked slowly, his body still weak, but his eyes steady, watching, listening. He hadn't just survived. He had waited. And now, the truth was no longer buried. The morning sun spilled across the steps of the Willow Creek Police Department as a small crowd gathered in the front courtyard. There were folding chairs set out neatly in rows, flowers along the railings, and a single table covered with photos. Some were of Lily, smiling wide in her new school uniform. Others showed Finn, scarred but proud, resting beside her or chasing leaves in the park. One picture showed the two of them asleep on a couch, Lily's arm around his neck, his nose tucked against her ribs. The bronze statue stood at the center of it all, a golden retriever, sitting tall, his ears perked, his eyes forever focused on something just ahead. In his mouth, clutched gently, was a scarf, a perfect cast of the one that had led them to her. The base of the statue bore a simple inscription: Finn. He followed the trail, no one else would. People clapped as the cloth was pulled away, revealing the statue for the first time. Officers stood at attention. A school choir hummed a soft tune in the background. Reporters took photos, but no one said much. They didn't need to. Everyone in Willow Creek knew what Finn had done. The story had spread far beyond their quiet town, told again and again as an example of loyalty, bravery, and something deeper, something harder to explain. He had not just found Lily. He had uncovered a truth no one else dared to see. Lily stood near the statue, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Her hair was longer now, and she wore a light blue dress that fluttered in the breeze. She had grown taller, stronger, but she still looked at Finn with the same wide eyes full of trust. Finn stood beside her. His muzzle was a little grayer now, his steps slower, but his gaze hadn't changed. He still scanned the crowd, still listened for every sound, still leaned just slightly toward Lily, always between her and the rest of the world. Joel watched from a short distance, his hands in his pockets, a quiet smile on his face. He didn't cry, not this time, but the pride in his chest ached almost as much as the fear had once done. After the ceremony, most of the crowd began to leave, murmuring goodbyes and wiping their eyes. But Lily stayed. She sat down cross-legged in the grass beside the statue. Finn settled down next to her, his body pressed against her leg. She leaned in and whispered something only he could hear. Finn's tail thumped once. Riley stepped up beside Joel and looked down at the pair. "She still comes every week," Joel said quietly. "Same time. Same scarf in her pocket." Riley nodded. "He still watches every door, every car that drives by, like he's making sure it's really over." Joel smiled. "For him, it's never over. Not until she's grown. Maybe not even then." And as the sun warmed the courtyard, the statue stood firm, the dog forever frozen in a moment of courage. But beside it, the real hero sat, older, wiser, breathing slow and steady, his ears twitching with every sound, still listening, still guarding, always waiting. If Finn's bravery moved you, help us share his story by hitting the like button. And if you want more incredible tales like this one, make sure to subscribe.